Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Contra Force, brought to us by Konami. Contra Force, the third of the Contra games on the NES, is a spin-off of the series, not having really any connections to the Contra series, and originally was going to be released in Japan under a different name with no connections to Contra whatsoever. So here we go with Contra Force for the NES. Unlike the other Contra games, there's 4 playable characters, and you can select any of them at any time, pausing the game to actually change your character that you're playing as well as bring in a second player, or even a CPU-controlled player for 5 seconds to help you out for a little bit of time. Something that ends up being a pretty cool feature in this title, but one I won't be using throughout. After the opening story, we get to the menu again. I'm going to press start there. You get to then select which of the characters you want to pick from, and I'm going to use Beans for this run. Some of the other characters are more interesting. You have one that has a homing missile that can be useful, but I find it a tad bit slow and clunky in its execution. A lot of times the missile will hit an enemy that is not the one right in front of you, instead going after one above or behind you. For the most part, the controls are similar to the other Contra games, though they're not as tight as them, especially when it comes to the firing in the various directions. Another big change is the power-up system. There's not random power-ups, instead you pick up briefcases that then fill up a meter at the bottom of the screen, similar to the Gradius series. When you have the one you want, the power-up you want, you can press select in order to then use it. However, you can only have one of the weapon ones, and for Bean, they're both not very useful for us. The main gun is what we're going to stick with. Getting the triple fire, which is the third of the power-ups possible, and finally the last of the power-ups, which gives you invulnerability when you're jumping. While it doesn't sound like it's all that useful, this game has quite a jump, as you've already been able to see, and you can actually bounce kind of off of enemies and bullets in the air with this, including the final boss of the game, which ends up being a pretty fun fight because of that. Be very careful on these platforms. They move very slowly, but you gotta make sure they're over enough before you attempt your jumps, or else you'll end up falling into that big pit below. Coming out later in the NES lifespan, this is one of those games that has gone up in price quite a bit and isn't really that well known overall. This game has 5 levels for us to deal with, 2 of which are from a top-down perspective, something that we've gotten used to in the NES Contra games, and it's not as fun as what we saw in Super C. Be careful of the slope that you don't go too quickly and end up jumping and hitting the boxes before you destroy them, or else you'll end up falling down into the pit, or going too fast after they're destroyed and jumping right into an enemy. The game has some really bad slowdown issues. There's just so many enemies and firing going on that it slows down quite a bit. Here we are with the first boss. He's going to drop on down. His big thing is rolling and then firing. He can't hit you with his fire if you're ducking, but of course if you're ducking and he rolls, you'll end up getting hit. But you can tell when he's about to do his next roll. After he finishes firing, there's a brief pause before he does his next big move, which may be a run, which is a little bit quicker than that roll, but still usually you can tell it's coming. There's even a way, if you press down and left at the same time while slowly moving, you can kind of get him to keep rolling away from you over and over again and keep firing all the way across the screen. Next up is the first of the 2 top-down perspective levels, the harbor-themed area. We're going to first start by going on this ship and then going to the left side and taking this path all the way up. The right path is a dead end, and the left path, instead of getting on top with all those extra enemies, we can just bypass quite a few of them by going this way. My strategy, just kind of like Super C, is to keep moving, and I usually don't end up getting too bombarded by enemies. These guys right here can be very tricky as soon as you come off that bridge because they are ready to fire. You have to kind of be ready to dodge at least one bullet before you can take them out. Go up here, watch out for these cannons. If you're moving quickly though, they shouldn't be too much of a threat. Along this path, we're going to stay around this line and work our way north until we find a ship and then get on the ship. You can get on any of them and you'll go to where you need to go. While you're traveling on the ship, be careful not to fall off. You can walk off the boat. And you have to deal with an annoying flicker constantly the whole time. Once on the submarine, head on to the next room. I'm going to go right to this table and walk across the top, and this allows me to avoid having to deal with this enemy. I can do the same for the next one, and then I can just bypass the third one altogether by heading to the right door. From there though, it's time for the boss encounter. There's a really neat trick to this boss. You have to get in the right spot, but if you're able to do so, he will fire his missiles straight through you. He won't be able to hit you at all with his one arm. Just keep turning slightly. Don't turn all the way though. You don't want to face the far left wall all the way because for some reason that will usually allow the missiles to end up hitting you. It's a little bit finicky and I have been hit before, but after trying this several times, I found that that little sweet spot works quite well for avoiding almost all of that guy's fire. Level number 3, we're going to head over to the right to start off and then jump onto an elevator that's going to slowly head upwards. Don't ride the elevator too far up. When it reaches its destination, it blows up and goes away, so you would have to go back to the bottom and get another one. You want to go to the second, though, of these two platforms, the top one here, as that'll take you across where we need. It does move a tad bit slow, that is for certain. Get over the boxes and drop on down and you'll find yourself at another one of these slow moving elevators. You don't have to ride this one for very long, you just have to get it up enough so you can get to the right side. Then you need to shoot upwards and destroy this, causing this box to fall, and it'll allow you to get sprung up here to the next level. From there, you have to use these metal chains, slowly work your way across. It's very easy to slip off of them, especially if you just move a little bit too far. Thankfully, it's easy to correct yourself, but they are a tad bit annoying. Over here, you have to jump quickly to this falling beam. It doesn't fall long before it blows up. If it does blow up, you will have to kind of backtrack and come back and get it to respawn. Here we have to kind of get another one to spawn, which can be difficult to get it to appear sometimes. I have to kind of go up the screen a little bit and just wait a few moments and it finally ends up showing up. Be very careful going across here. You can destroy these pipes. If you get stuck in a spot, you can hopefully destroy the ones above you, and that way you can kind of get across without having to fall down below. Slowly make your way up this set of platforms until you make it to the top and go to the left side. Here we have to destroy a whole lot of boxes as we work our way over to the left side. When you make it all the way over, just destroy that machine, and this will cause the screen to shift a little bit, and then we can continue over to the left side and enter into the boss encounter. For this boss, it's a giant ship. Start off immediately by destroying the cannon in the center part. Once you take out that, the fight becomes a breeze for sure, but you need to at least get that destroyed first. And even then, it's hard for it to hit you unless you're directly underneath of it. Once it's taken care of, start taking out any of the other one of these laser shooting cannons that you like. You have to destroy all 4 of them in order for the fight to be over with. Just be careful that you're not in their direct line of sight when they're about to fire, and you shouldn't have too much trouble taking these things out. It'll take a while, but eventually this ship's cannons will be destroyed, and then the ship itself is done, and we're moving on to level number 4, another one of the top-down perspective stages. This is a pretty strange level. We're in the air and we have to go through multiple giant planes as we travel across each one. We start off on the bottom left wing of one and we have to work our way up to the other wing. There's plenty of enemies lining both sides here. Be careful while going through quickly. The game will slow down a lot, which always ends up helping you in this game. The slowdown just allows you to get your fire off a little bit more precisely and dodge them a little bit more easily. Once inside this area, head over to the left side, destroying the boxes along the way. Be very careful at the end. There's a bunch of missile shooting enemies. They mostly will miss as their missiles will hit the barrier, but still potentially could hit you, so you have to be a little bit cautious there. Head across over here, destroying more boxes, and then opening up this wall and heading out to the other wing. Head north, watching out for a few enemies that you may end up running into. There's not going to be too many, but it only takes one, of course, to cost you a life in this game. When you reach the end of the plane, it may seem like a dead end. You have to wait a few moments, and eventually another plane will show up, and then you have to wait for them to connect, and then you can walk across. It looks like you can first just walk across the gap when they first appears, but you can't. You'll fall down in between and end up losing a life that way, so you have to be very, very careful there. From there, just head up north across this wing, destroying the few enemies that are scattered along it. When you reach the end of the area, open up the wall and head on inside. There's a lot of enemies, so be prepared to take them all out before attempting to walk on through. Open the boxes and stuff, and then open this wall and head on up and get through that area as fast as you can. There will be some cannons that open up the fire, but if you move quickly, you shouldn't have to destroy really any except for one on either left or right side as you're heading north. Head across this wing, once again waiting at the end of it, and another plane will show up in a few moments and allow you to once again walk across the wings. It's just a small plane ride this time around as we go across the wings quickly, and then after defeating one enemy, we're once again just waiting a few moments for another vehicle to show up. If you're at the top here, you can avoid all these missiles that are going to end up being fired out. Make sure, of course, they've come together before going between them. You may want to get the screen to scroll with you. It can sometimes be a little finicky if you're at the top of it. Wait patiently for another one of these planes, and eventually it will end up showing up and we can walk to the next wing. Don't go too quickly up this one, there is an enemy waiting for you. And then, once again, you're waiting a few moments. It's a lot of waiting in this. And waiting is the hardest part, right? Head over to the last of the big wings that we're going to have to travel along in this level, thankfully. Heading up north, there's a lot of enemies. I'm just going to move back and forth, quickly firing. I recommend going a lot slower, but I know the few enemies that are going to be right in my way here. Open up the wall here, head on inside, and then head over to the right. Destroy the 2 turrets, and get ready for the next boss encounter. This one isn't too bad either. We're going to attack from below. Just keep on firing. He'll fire across, and after he gets across, he'll then jump, but like only a little bit, usually downwards. Just immediately go back into the same pattern of him moving across quickly. Once he gets too close to you, get behind him and repeat the pattern direction the other way. But for the most part, you should be able to take his health down before he reaches the bottom portion of the screen. Once he's defeated, we're moving on to the final level of the game. As soon as we begin the final level, we're immediately going to run over to the right. The boss kind of chases us a little bit here, but we're just going to avoid him until we get to the place where we can actually face off with him. Be careful of these stairs. You can destroy the stairs, and it will cost you a little bit of time as you work your way back. You'll have 2 paths to go, left or right. Take the left path and head up the chains, dealing with a few enemies. The grenade throwing guy can be a bit annoying. I recommend taking him out before heading up the chain. Here, once again, the boss guy is kind of going to get in our way. I'm just going to destroy this part of the stairs. He's going to go through and then back off and come back, and he's gone. Now we can just head up the stairs and work our way up to the top of the level. Once again, choose the left of the 2 paths. You have to jump from the top platform. And head over to the left a little bit. Thankfully, the invulnerability that I have when I'm in the air comes in handy quite a bit during this level. After we reach the end here, it's time for the final boss fight. I'm going to start off by ducking here, firing a little bit. As soon as he throws the grenade, I'm going to immediately jump. As you can see, you can bounce off the bullets if you're invulnerable. If you don't have the invulnerability, the recommendation I have is be on a different level than him. You'll be able to avoid most of his fire, and it's really the missiles from the helicopter that you have to worry about. Don't come out too far unless you have to. If you have the invulnerability though, you can have a lot of fun with this fight, bouncing off of the bullets, grenades, and even jumping on top of him, bouncing up into the air and then firing downward straight for a nice set of shots before you end up having to land. Just be careful that you don't end up landing too close to him so that you end up going immediately into vulnerability and end up getting hit. Once you take him down though, you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Contra Force on the NES. So there you have it, Contra Force, the third of the Contra games on the NES, and probably the least popular, I would say. It's also the most expensive of the Contra games on the NES, so it's one of those distinct ones where it's not the best, and it's also expensive. So I'm sure a lot out there have just skipped it overall or played it through other means instead of actually getting a cart over the years, and I can say it's not necessarily worth paying all that money for, but it's not that bad of a game. As the credits finish up, we have the Konami logo, and then it goes back to the main start screen where we can begin the game all over again. But with that, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.